Hello, everyone, and I want to thank you for joining us today. I am so excited to be talking with Pat today. Pat and I met because she inspired me to write my book, Life After Child Loss, and she is also an author. And Pat Sheveland helps those who are grieving the death of a loved one find peace and purpose to achieve long-term healing. We all could use healing, couldn't we? She is a registered nurse, Spring Forest Qigong certified trainer, and a certified life coach whose sole purpose is to be a healing guide for those who grieve. As a child born with a grieving family, she brings a unique perspective to family grief and is compassionate and loving support to those who are mourning the death of their loved one. Pat is also a certified funeral celebrant, serving families who choose funerals and celebration of life outside services of a formalized church. She is the Amazon bestseller author of How Do I Survive? 7 Steps to Living After Child Loss, and lives outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota, in a multi-generational home with her family. Well, Pat, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Oh, Peggy, thank you so much for inviting me in. It's a joy to connect with you again.
Yes, and again, and in this world where we are so similar, and what we're doing is helping people to heal. If you want to share just a little bit, you talk about bringing unique experience. What is it that's unique about your situation that gives you the expertise and the experience to help others?
Well, it's interesting. A lot of people will say, "Oh, are you the one that you lost your child? I'm so sorry." And then I let them know I'm not the mother who lost her child. I was the child born to a grieving mother. My
Mhm.
brother, 6 years before I was born, he was 4 months old and he died unexpectedly. And so when I came around 6 years after the fact, I have another brother that's 3 years older than me, came in, and then I came in 6 years after the fact. And I just knew that life was different in our household, different than my friends. It was very quiet. It was a very subdued home. We didn't have a lot of laughter and you know playing and all of that kind of stuff within the home. We did a lot of it outside of the home, but I always knew that there was something. And then I found out when I was probably 5 or 6 years old that about my brother. I did not know. No one ever talked about Greg. Greg was everything about him, his spirit, his name, everything was buried when he was buried back in 1952. And so I found out, I found some pictures. I was up in the attic playing around. I was like 5 or 6 years old. I used to love to go to the attic and hang out in the attic and look at all the old photo albums of all these people that I didn't know who they were, but I just felt a connection to the generations before me. And I found a little manila envelope, a little 5x7 manila envelope. And inside were 2 pictures, black and white photos of this child, this baby. And he just didn't look right. Something just wasn't right. And I thought, why would my parents have these pictures of this baby? Because I knew he wasn't any of my other brothers. I have 3 older brothers. And I knew it was none of them because I've seen all their baby pictures. So I don't know if my mom came up to figure out what I was doing up in the attic, or if I took the manila envelope to her and said, "Who is this baby?" And I remember saying something about, "He looks like a sick baby." I recognized that at that young age. And she told me that I had a brother and his name was Greg. And it was then that it was like, oh my gosh, I had this deep connection with this child. Only he wasn't a baby in my mind, but I just had this deep connection. I wondered all these things about him. And his birthday was the day before mine. So I would think about, oh, how would we have been? How would you have been compared to my other brothers? Would you have liked me? Would we have been buddies because our birthdays are close at hand, that type of thing. And then I would start hanging out at the cemetery when I was old enough. I somehow figured out that his grave was at the cemetery. And I don't know how I found that out. I think it's because my neighbor died and his gravestone was at the cemetery. And I used to go ride my little bike as a little grade school girl and go hang out at the cemetery and sit by Greg's gravestone and just be with him. and be with his spirit. So that was my kind of entree into what it's like to be a part of a grieving family. And interestingly enough, I mean, that was kind of how I handled it, but we didn't talk about him in the home. Didn't feel comfortable bringing it up to my parents because they apparently chose not to speak about him. So I just kind of silently had a connection with him. And then in 2012, my brother Greg would have turned 60 years old. And my mom was in her late 80s. And she decided to finally open up that birthday, that anniversary, 60 years after the fact. She finally opened up to me what it was like back then. And at that time, I was still working as a corporate executive in a role that I was in for 20 some years, but I was also a life coach. I was training to be a life coach. And so I just started asking her questions and sitting with her and asking more questions, and helped her to what I think of as unearth her feelings and those deep emotions that were buried for 60 years.
Wow, that's a long
And
time.
so we really were able to open it up. She could talk about her guilt. She talked about her feelings of abandonment, her feelings of isolation back then, her anger. Her anger had a lot of what happened during that situation, because he died very unexpectedly after getting some baby shots. So all this stuff just kind of erupted within her, and we allowed to give it that air that it needed so she could find some healing in her late 80s. And that was kind of my first trigger, like, wow, there's something here that I'm supposed to be helping grieving parents with. I also would volunteer unexpectedly. I'm not a real maternal person, really, not real. And I just had my godmother had died, and I had looked on the mortuary website to figure out when her services were. And I saw this little icon, and it was a balloon and little red balloon and a heart. And it said Children's Grief Connection. And that's all it said. And I thought, what is that? So I just felt driven that I needed to find out more about this organization. And I found out that it was Children's Grief Connection is an organization, a nonprofit that provides camps for grieving kids and their families. And I was just like adamant, I have to volunteer at these camps. I just have to do it. I mean, I was signing up. I didn't know why. I really had no clue, but it was like, I just had to do this. I was just driven. So I'm signing it up. I'm doing all the paperwork, getting my background check so I could work with kids and all of that. And I went to the camp. And again, I was around grieving parents. And I realized then what my parents had gone through. I could see in today's world exactly what they had been going through back then. It was right up in front of me. And so I went back to my mom and I said, Mom, I think you have a real story to tell here. So I wrote a book way back then about our family and that story. And then just fast forwarding, so I wrote that book. I just lost my train of thought. And then I started my coaching business. And the first two women who came to me were grieving moms. Now, I never advertised to work with grieving people. I was a life coach, a generic life coach. Going through my training, I needed to get the hours, so I hung my shingle out, and the first two people were grieving moms. One was where her son had died 5 years prior, and the other woman, her child had died 30 years prior, and she didn't realize that that's where her current challenges in life were coming from. She thought it was due to the death of her father that had just occurred within the last year of that. But then as we started opening up and through the coaching process of awareness, she shared about her daughter. And we actually worked through how to help her in healing all the way back from 30 years forward. So that's what gives me a unique perspective, is I'm the child. But the other thing is I've worked with so many grieving families now, and especially moms like yourself. And I call all of you my wisdom keepers. I have not experienced it. I will never say, I know what you're going through. I will never, and I hope to God, I never have to experience that ever. So I'll never say that because I don't know exactly what you're going through. I know how it is to be a part of a family where grief has engulfed the home. And the people that I've worked with, I was able to see women who could successfully move forward in their life and find happiness, find purpose. They all had commonalities. Whereas other women that I knew who didn't also had commonalities of what I called failed grief. They didn't have the ability to grieve fully, to be able to use that as the healing source. So that's a
Huh.
long story. That's a long story.
You know, but you really shared some details and some importance, and you know, the fact that you've been through it. We have some components that are very similar on that grief process, but that's amazing in how you've used to heal. So you've also written a book, you know, the 7 steps to living after child loss. So tell me a little bit more about your book, and what does your Breathe program look like?
Okay. Well, the 7th step, I don't, again, things happen and I just get something in my head and I call it like spirit is just talking to me. And a little over a year ago in April, I saw this ad to write a book to help coaches to kind of reach their people. And it was for servant-centered businesses. And I thought, wow, this would be really good. Because my first book was just really more of a memoir, and it was stories and a lot of stories of other grieving families and grieving moms. But that was just something I self-published, and I really didn't do anything with it. But then this was like, wow, this would be really great if I could write something that actually created, took all the knowledge that I got from all the grieving parents and families that I worked with. And so that's where the 7 steps came from. Like I said, you all are my wisdom keepers. So I've taken all the information, I've seen what works and what doesn't work, and I've been able to package it. And it just came so easily, like, okay, here, people need to breathe. So it just ended up that the acronym was BREATHE, because when we're grieving, the first thing that happens when we start sobbing is our breath gets caught and we forget to exhale. We forget something that is so natural, because grieving the death of a child is so unnatural. It's not the way that life is supposed to be. And so that BREATHE is an acronym. So it's lots of different steps. The first thing is really being aware of who you are today, because you're not the same person that you were before your child died. Everything
True.
changes, right? You've experienced twice in your life. You're not the same person. Your values may have changed. You may have tolerance for some things and intolerances for other things that seem inconsequential. So everything in your life changes the day that you become a grieving mom. And so we take a look at that, and then we take a look at where are you at in various areas of your life, whether it's your spiritual, your family relationships, the intimacy that you have or don't have, play. Are you doing any play? We take a look at all these areas in your life, typical coaching type questions, to see where is your grief really impacting your life in a negative way, so that we can start honing in on those to figure out tools and actions to move those up a notch to make it better for my clients. So I do a lot of that's kind of personality inventories, all of that kind of stuff, to see where the strengths are and where challenges may be. And then the next step is reimagining our life. For my clients, it's reimagining their lives, because everything has changed. So what is it they really want? What are they looking for? And for my clients, especially grieving moms, well, and I have a client now, her husband died like maybe 4 months ago. I'm not asking to go figure out what you want things to look like 5 years from now. It's like, how would you like to be in 6 months or a year? What would you like things to look like? How are you feeling? so that we take these baby steps and have a good idea of what that looks like. And then the next step is engaging your tribe. And you and I have talked offline about this. I think this is one of the most critical steps, because a lot of times we depend on our family. But the problem with that is our family is grieving also. When we've had a loss, our family is grieving. And so that is so important that we find the people in our tribe that can be very supportive, and who, I say 1 or 2 people that, a coach like yourself or a coach like me, add one of those to your tribe. Maybe a good friend that that you can just call in the middle of the night and they're just going to listen. They're the ones that are really going to help you, because your family is an amazing support, but they're going through their stuff too. So you need to have people that may be a little bit removed from that to be your total support. So that's engaging your tribe.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And then we talk about healing. So A is accessing your inner healer. And so what are the things that you can do physically, emotionally, spiritually to really help yourself get in better health, and mental and emotional health, and physical health? Because when you're grieving, that can all go to pot. It can just not focused on myself.
I think that sort of health is the one that we have a tendency to neglect. It's like putting our oxygen mask on, because if we're not doing well, we can't make it, if we don't take care of ourselves, then we can't move through our grief. We can't help others through their grief. So really, that's so important to be able to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. And, so I help my clients create a tailor-made and individualized health and wellness plan. So it's not cookie cutter. Nothing about my program is cookie cutter, because as you know, grief is not cookie cutter. There is no one way to do it. There is no linear path. It goes up and down and all around. And so that's really what my program is, to help individualize what works for my clients individually. So then let's see, where are we at? Oh, transforming your views is the T in breathe. And that is, when we come to the table of grief, any one of us, whatever the grief may be, we bring all of our past, all of our history, all of our past experiences, all of our past traumas, all of those things, our beliefs, our stories, and we bring that all to that present table of grief. And so I like to work with my clients and see, where are some of those things maybe stopping you from moving forward. So with my mother, I always tell the story about, she felt very abandoned when Greg died. She didn't feel anybody was there for her. Well, after I had her share with me what kind of went on pre and post, there were 4 deaths in that family. My cousin died at the age of not even quite 12 from a ruptured appendix. So he died very unexpectedly on a Saturday, and that was very traumatic. So he was my first cousin, my dad's sister's son. A few weeks after that, on a Saturday, my dad's sister, Bobby's mother, had a ruptured aneurysm in her brain, and she died unexpectedly. So there's 2 in that household, my dad's sister, his nephew. Then my great-grandmother, my dad's grandmother, who lived with Bobby and Eleanor, died on a Saturday, a few weeks after Eleanor died. So here is 3 people who live in the same household who died. And then a few weeks after that, on a Saturday, my brother Greg died. So my grandmother on my dad's side, one of the most beautiful women I've ever met. And I just couldn't figure out, I couldn't grasp, why wouldn't they have been there for my mom, this most devastating time of her life? And then all of a sudden I said to Mom, I said, oh my God, Grandma lost her first grandchild, her daughter, her mother, and another grandchild, all within a matter of a couple of months. I don't think she had it in her whatsoever to be able to provide for anybody. She was in her own, and I believe my dad was the same way. And once I was able to kind of unwrap that for her, and she could take a look at it with a different view, it made sense to her that people didn't abandon her. They just didn't have it in them. And that was
Right.
very, very helpful for her. So that's what I do, is talk about transforming our view, because sometimes that anger, the guilt, the abandonment, those emotions of grief can get you stuck. And that's not going to help to create this life where you feel like it's really worth getting out of bed for every day. So that's the transforming the view. And then is honoring your child. They never did that with my brother Greg. They never acknowledged him. And now I honor him. And on his birthday, I will go put flowers on his grave. And I've taken my mom's now 96, so she doesn't go to the cemetery with me. She doesn't leave the house. But I've taken her there, and we've walked around to all her loved ones, but we spend time with Greg. And I'll tell you, my whole growing up years, maybe she went and did it on her own and spent time at the graveside, but I never knew about it. My dad, I don't know that he ever went up there. So I take the time to really honor his memory. And I think that's so important, that that people find ways to honor their children, honor their loved one, keep their memories and their spirits alive. Because grief is all about love. And we would not grieve if we had not loved so deeply. And that love doesn't go away. It doesn't go away. So we need a way to honor that. And some people will do like you wrote a book about your story and what worked for you, so that you can help other grieving parents on this journey. I talked to a man, I interviewed him last week, and his son died of opioid overdose. He got addicted to drugs when he had a sports injury when he was in high school. And so he's going out and he's speaking to, like he said he just did, where he talked to nursing programs and spoke about the other part of the opioid epidemic, what happens to the family. So that's really important for him to be able to share that. So it may be little things of honoring, or it may be big things. And then the last part of the Breathe program, the last E in Breathe, is embracing your future. And so I work with my clients on figuring out, what is your purpose now? Because one of the most common things I have is, I don't know what my purpose is in life anymore since my child died. So we work through that and figure out what might that be. So that's the Breathe program. Lots of stuff inside of there, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, well, that's amazing, Pat. And thank you so much. I really feel like it encompasses a holistic style of healing the whole body, and the relationships and your physical being, and your healing, your energy. I just feel like it's an overall, embracing program. So with that, and you've been working with others with this program, if you can give me just a quick summary of like your favorite client that you've worked with, and the type of results that you've seen, maybe, like where they started, what they were experiencing, and where they are now, and as they've been working with you in your program.
Oh, well, they're all my favorites, so I can't say there's one favorite. I worked with a woman in California, and it was actually her niece who had died, and it was her twin sister's child. And so it was just as if her daughter died, right? There was such a close connection. And her niece had been sick for a while. And she came to me, and she couldn't stop crying. She cried and cried and cried and just said, I just can't stop. I don't know what to do. So she entered my program, and it's so much fun. And I've told her this too. I wish I would have had a time-lapse camera, because I work with people and talk to them every week on one-on-one coaching calls. And every week she really was very good about following through on the homework that she committed to do. And every week her face got, we do it via Zoom, got brighter and brighter and brighter and lighter and lighter. And
Wow.
I'm like, oh, if I would have had a time lapse camera to show what she looked like, and so sad and so forlorn in the beginning. And then within just a few weeks, she's getting brighter and brighter. And the amazing thing with her is she couldn't sleep. She really had difficulty sleeping because this was always on her mind, this grief, and her niece was always on her mind. And I taught her some breathing exercises. That's one of the first things I do. Of course, it's a breathe program, right? And
That's a good thing.
how to calm herself down and some different things. And she started sleeping. And I said, when did that start? Because I asked her later on if, several weeks into it. And she said, that first week, just by having someone that she could share with and process her grief with and really feel heard, and then taking some active actions towards her own healing and taking her own oxygen mask, right? She started breathing, and she said she sleeps 7 hours a night, and she had continuously then. It was just like something shifted. And when we're not sleeping, the sleep deprivation is not helping us at all either. So think about how that impacts. It impacts your family life. It impacts your mood swings. It can impact you at work because it's hard to stay awake. I mean, it's all, and your physical health. So that was like one of the best, but I have a bazillion stories. I love seeing my clients they emerge out of their cocoons and become butterflies.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. So we just have a few more minutes, but I do have a question I wanted to talk about this because it's where your mom came from and where you felt even a little bit about the abandonment and guilt. How does that create an imbalance in your physical and emotional well-being? So these emotions that you have experienced in yourself and in your mother. So how has that impacted your wellness?
Well, I tell you, thank you for asking. That's a great question. And you had mentioned that it's a Qigong. I'm a Qigong teacher, trainer, and Qigong is ancient Chinese medicine to help us in our own, because we're all born our own healers. But there is what they call the 5-element theory in Chinese medicine and through Qigong. And in that 5-element theory, emotions, 80% of the energy blockages, which arise into illnesses and physical challenges, come from emotions and come from emotions that are negative emotions. So interestingly enough, grief, depression, very deep sadness is associated with our breathing system. Once you know that, it's our lungs. Because so this whole breathing thing, all plays into that. And our lungs are just so important, of course, to have healthy lungs. So I think about my mom and all the years that she had bronchitis and all of that, and the breathing issues that she had. And then she ended up with congestive heart failure as she got older. And for her, worry and anxiety, extreme anxiety, and she always worried like she was strange. Was I strange when Greg died? And she always worried that she was strange her whole life. And that resides, worry, in our stomach and pancreas and those areas. And my mom and our intestines, our large intestines, my mom has always had like irritable bowel syndrome, always. And so I started working with her and using Qigong, which is a very gentle form of healing. And we were able to, after her whole life of having horrible stuff going on with irritable bowel syndrome, we were able to pretty much eradicate it. And she doesn't have those issues because she would do the Qigong with me because it's very gentle and loving. And the lung energy, of course, is just so important to keep that flowing. So that's, I tell most people, what's happened since your child died? Have you been sick? Or I had one client that, just really quickly, her son died by suicide, and she was the one who found him. And within a couple months after he died, she ended up in the hospital septic. And sepsis is where you have a raging infection going through your body.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very, very serious and life-threatening. And she ended up septic. And what it was is that her kidneys, she had kidney infection. And so it was hitting that area. Well, the kidneys in this 5-element theory, fear is the one that can block the kidney energy, our life vitality force. And I found it so interesting because she talked about, she had the PTSD of finding her son, and she would have these flashbacks to that day. Well, that's just total fear overriding her system constantly. And so that's what we worked on. She said, I just want to stop having these flashbacks. And I'll tell you, within just a matter of weeks and doing this program, she was able to do that. And she's doing great. And she still does Qigong to this day because she's found it so helpful to keep her healthy.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. And combining, medicine that's been around for thousands of years with the knowledge that we have, that you've been so beneficial, that you've been able to bring those together. I think that's absolutely amazing. So Pat, we've had a great conversation here, and I bet that we have so many people out there that are just really wondering how they can get in touch with you and to learn more about your books, about your Breathe program. What is the best way for them to reach out to you?
The best way is to go to my website, www.healingfamilygrief.com. So it's easy to remember, healingfamilygrief.com. You can order a free book. I can send you a free ebook if you're interested in that. Just fill out the form and I'll shoot it off to you. There's also a contact me form. So if you want to chat, we can talk about it. And there's a calendar, and I offer, a free conversation. We can get together and chat for an hour or so and see what's going on with you. And I'd be more than happy to be available. So there's lots of resources there.
Oh, Pat, thank you. Thank you so much for your time. And I know that with your mission, if your sole purpose, you've said, was to be a light for those who grieve by providing compassionate guidance and care for those who are mourning the death of their loved one. And that doesn't mean yesterday they're passing, but as in your mother's case, 60 years, and she was still able to heal. So you're doing some awesome work. And I really am so grateful that we are in this same arena, because the grief world is one where we've lost contact. We don't have ceremonies, we don't have rituals, and even more so limited right now with the health crisis that we're in and limited contact. So you're doing wonderful work. Again, Pat Sheveland, and that is www. Did I get too many W's in there? The healingfamilygrief.com. There we go. Healingfamilygrief.com. And thank you, Pat, so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Peggy. It's been an honor.
Yes, and thank you.